That's my loving wife that makes me the relationship authority. She loves me. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for the wonderful turnout tonight. How many have not heard me speak before? Okay, great. Usually I talk for an hour and a half, but I'm going to talk for 20 minutes and then do 20 minutes of question and answers. Because I do more than write books. I'm a public speaker, love to do that. So I just had a cappuccino so I could talk real fast. And there'll be time for me to sign some books at the end of tonight. But this is a really exciting book for me. It's been about 6 years since I wrote a book on relationships. I wrote Men Are From Mars over 18 years ago and written many spin-off books as well, Starting Over, or On a Date, In a Bedroom, Together Forever, etc., etc. And they were really all based upon the basic ideas of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And then something happened in the last 6, 7 years. Women changed, and men didn't. New research shows that used to be women were happier than men. They're not anymore. Men are not happier. It's just that men haven't changed, but women have. Their stress levels have actually gone up. New research shows that when men come home from work, their stress levels drop, which means we start to relax and feel happier. When women come home, their stress levels double, which means they're not happier. And they often look over at us guys who really know how to take care of ourselves. We're sitting on a couch watching TV. And it's amazing how many women think we're lazy. Now, this is a guy who'll go to work, do everything possible to support his family, care for his children, and so forth. If there's a storm outside, he runs outside to fix things. If there's a dispute with a neighbor, he'll go talk to that person. If the computer breaks, he'll sit there for 16 hours until that thing works again. Men are amazing, but yet women look at him, who's this guy who cares so much about me, but he comes home and sits on the couch? What good is he? Well, women are overwhelmed, stressing out over all the things that they have to do. And we wonder why. And you wonder why we're sitting on that couch. Well, one of those chapters, chapter 5, I think, is called A Woman's Never-Ending To-Do List. The more stress women are under, the longer that list gets. Can any women relate to having a never-ending to-do list? This list that just gets bigger and bigger. And about 20 years ago, I used to try to get men to help women complete that list. But it's never ending. So I could convince them in the beginning, okay, she's got 20 things to do. Why don't you do 10 of those things? And then they'll make her happy. He says, okay, if that will make her happy, I'll take on 10 new responsibilities. And he'd do that, and by the time he'd done his 10, she had another 10 or 15. And he figures, what's the point of it? And the truth is, men are just as exhausted as women today, except men do regenerate themselves and women don't. And that's what this great new book is about, which is, I don't need to write another relationship book, except that there's all this new research explaining why men are from Mars and why women are from Venus, and we're living in a new world from when I wrote that book, with women being so much more under stress. Now, why are women more under stress? And this is an important message for men, because we'll say, what's the matter, honey? And then she'll list out 20 things. And every time she says something, in her brain would go, but not important. But not important. So don't do it. Who cares? Bonnie might say to me, look, we got to clean up the house, we've got a party. I could say, well, it's only our friends. I've learned not to say that. But another guy might say, so it's just our friends, so who cares? They've got messy houses. And she says, no, we're inviting over the new neighbors. We want to make a good impression. He says, well, they're new. We don't even know if we even care about them. So men can rationalize anything if they need to rest. And that is one of the big distinctions between men and women under stress. And we're all under huge stress today. And to a great extent, when men are under stress, they become even more acutely aware of their needs, whereas women become more acutely aware of other people's needs. And so women end up feeling overwhelmed with this long list of things that has to do with making everybody else happy. And who gets at the end of that list? Her. And does she ever reach it? Not that often. And when she does, sometimes she feels guilty instead of like, gee, I need a doctor's prescription to say this should be at the front of the list. That's what this book is teaching women how to most effectively cope with stress today and understanding why women are under more stress today. Because men won't believe it. When you talk about all the things that are stressing you out, we say, hey, just sit on the couch and watch TV. What's your problem? Well, let's understand why there's this big gulf between men and women. It just gets wider and wider as stress levels go up, because we are inherently different, and those differences tend to be most dramatic around how we cope with stress. And one of the inspirations for the new book was these 3 women researchers at UCLA about 5 or 6 years ago did these stress tests, and they proved that something nobody knew before regarding stress. All of the stress tests before were done on men, and they did it on men because women were unpredictable with their menstrual cycle, so it wasn't scientific. So let's just pick men. And what they found is testosterone will lower stress in a man's body. But they didn't know that testosterone, the hormone testosterone, doesn't lower stress in a woman's body. Well, what does? Can anything? Yes. What they found is a hormone called oxytocin. And oxytocin is a hormone when stimulated. The body can make it, but it has to be stimulated. The body can make testosterone, but it has to be stimulated. And in order to stimulate the production of oxytocin, women need to be in situations and circumstances where there is a sense of security, where there's a sense of predictability, where there's a sense of connection. Lots of things will stimulate oxytocin. Talking is a big thing to stimulate oxytocin. Because really, whenever a woman feels she's alone, her oxytocin levels go down. So when you can communicate and people hear you, your oxytocin levels go up. The problem in a marriage is after a while she says the same stuff. There's nothing you can do about it, so he just turns off the ear when she starts talking. After a while she stops even bothering to talk. And yet what I know is that one of the most powerful ways to help a woman lower stress is to get her to talk and listen. And the evidence for that I saw a long time ago. USA Today came out with some statistic that 90% of all people who go to therapy are women. Now, the therapy is serious business here. There's more therapists than there's more therapists than nurses and doctors combined. So it's a big, big business. 90% of the people that pay for that business are women. So what does this mean, men? Women will pay to have somebody listen. It's big time. I mean, men don't value that. They don't understand that you've got this great superpower that you can wield very easily, but you underestimate it. You don't realize how powerful that is. Just like these roses right here. This is a superhuman power. I just have to bring these to my lovely wife and she smiles. So you just have to bring roses. And men think, well, I did that already. The actual sharing of the flower, going and getting it, all that says he thinks of her, that she's special, that she's important. So it's all symbolic. And so when he brings the roses, it says that she is seen and heard and she's not alone. Anything you can do that gives a woman the message that she's not alone. And women throughout the day feel they're alone. They feel like, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this, and it's all up to me. And that means you feel alone. Men, however, when they feel I have to do this and this and this and it's all up to me, guess what that does for a man? That raises his testosterone. Whenever you feel urgency, whenever you feel emergency, whenever you feel it's all up to you, that you have to do it, testosterone levels go up. And women, every woman in this room has got this list, this never-ending list of everything you have to do. And so what does that list do for you? It stimulates testosterone. Now, grandmothers kind of knew how to create oxytocin, whether they didn't consciously know, they just had a lifestyle of behaviors that stimulate oxytocin throughout the day. And therefore, a woman's stress levels were much lower. Women were happier. They were more content. They were more satisfied. They were more fulfilled. They were more fertile. All those things are associated with normal oxytocin levels. It will keep a woman's stress levels down. But today, particularly in the last 6 to 8 years, more than in the last 30 years, women are doing jobs every day that stimulate testosterone. We might call these jobs in the jungle. I was just down in Ecuador. If you notice, how many saw that wonderful article in the San Francisco Chronicle? Any? Can I see your hands? Just curious. About me, yeah. Thank you. Be specific. So my wife's always saying, I never introduce it. What are we talking about here? Okay, so, all right. So yes, in the first part of the article, it was about the Pachamama Alliance. The interviewer had come into our house to look at the refrigerator, and she saw our commitments to the Pachamama Alliance, a wonderful community group here and around the country, helping people be aware of sustainability and so forth. And I did a tour down to Ecuador with them as part of my training as a Pachamama teacher, which I also do at my ranch in Mendocino. And anyway, long story to say, went down there with them and stayed with the Ashwar Indians. We had to fly in. We had to go in a canoe for hours. We had to walk for 6.5 hours through the jungle, and it was pretty exciting, fun stuff. Particularly fun for me because my wife would appreciated my being there. At one point, she went, "Oh, I'm so glad you're here." I would just fall down and cry. I went, "Yes, I'm here, honey." Now, what did that situation do? That raised my testosterone levels to feel like I can be helpful to her, and she was not alone, and therefore that raised her oxytocin levels. Not that all life stories have to be that way, but we can understand why there's a romantic section of this bookstore that men don't even know exists. But women have this whole awareness of romance and what romance means, which is a man being there for her at her time of need. The problem today is that women are so self-sufficient and so capable of taking care of themselves. What do they need a man for? So women ask that question and wonder why, don't even bother anymore. There's now, in the last 10 years, a significantly greater number of single women than ever before in history. And in Australia, they say it's the men who are not interested, but clearly in America, it's the women that aren't interested. They've kind of given up on it more and more because they get in relationships and they just don't get what they need. And often, as a therapist, what I hear men and women, women particularly, 90%, is there'll be 3 categories that women complain about. We complain about the things that are most important. And what are those 3 things? Romance. They say the romance has stopped. They say that he doesn't listen. And then they say he doesn't help out around the house. And then everybody gets focused on trying to get him to help out around the house. If you flip it around, it has the opposite effect. There's never a guy that doesn't help out enough if he's getting his regular sexual fulfillment. If you think about guys in the beginning of relationships, they've got tons of energy. Then later on in the marriage, they're tired, and they say, well, we're just getting old. But the reality is when men feel that there's success in the relationship, when he can be successful in making his partner happy, his energy levels will go up just being in that relationship. But when women feel that he can't be successful, his energy goes down and her energy goes down. The amazing thing about this hormone oxytocin is that when oxytocin levels are low, women's cortisol levels go high, she will experience half the amount of energy her body's designed to make. But you see, your brain still runs on full potential. It's running all the time. Women's brains don't turn off, but they don't have enough energy to fuel that brain. And this is just basic facts, is that when you're under stress, your body has elevated cortisol levels. It can't burn fat for energy. It can only burn carbohydrates for energy. So you see, as women get older and their cortisol levels gradually get higher and higher, they have less energy. They feel more responsible, and if they're a certain body type, they just can't get rid of the extra pounds. They just start getting a little bigger, a little bigger. I was just in the room waiting to come out here, and there was some new diet, another new diet, another new diet. All these diets, whatever diet you do, if you're under stress, 90% of them, according to your body type, will not work because women cannot burn fat. Not many calories you eat. It's can you burn the fat calories? We already got calories on our body, so can you burn those fat calories? Well, you can't burn fat when your oxytocin levels are low. Here's a fun story. It was sort of opened my awareness many years to this. I have women in counseling, and they'd often, sometimes weight was an issue for them, one of the issues. And they decide they're just going to go on a vacation and go to Italy and forget about their diet, eat all the pasta they want. They're going to just do wandering around, lots of walking, no urgency, no hurry, so no testosterone. They're going to visit art galleries, major oxytocin producers. And what happens? They come back and they've lost all this weight. And it's like, how did that happen? I didn't even try. That's the whole key, is when you do something that you love to do that's enjoyable, that's oxytocin producing, your stress levels will go down, your body will start generating energy from fat. That's what it burns when you're relaxed. When you're stressed, it burns sugar. Think about it. When you're stressed, what do you want? Cookies, ice cream, carbohydrates. When the kids are running around, you give them toast to calm them down. It's all just, because when we're under stress, our bodies can get energy from carbohydrate, can't get it from fat. So what we want to learn to do is, all these wonderful benefits come from helping women experience more oxytocin. One of the problems of that is that men don't need oxytocin. There used to be this old thing that they said about men is that men don't have enough friends. Of course, enough was invented by women. And I was kind of always thinking, maybe I don't have enough friends, but I felt very satisfied with a couple of really close friends. And finally this research came along and I figured it out. See, women are constantly running out of oxytocin, and friends stimulates oxytocin. So women really need as much oxytocin as they get. So they need all these friends. Men just need one, and then one backup. When he dies, you got another, and that's about it. We don't really have that need, and yet, there's all this sort of sympathy in the therapy movement. Oh, we got to help these men open up their hearts and have friends and all this stuff. And it's like, well, it's a lot of it's not necessary. We'll put it that way. But the flip side of this is all these things that stimulate oxytocin in women. See, men don't need oxytocin. We have an abundance of it. When we're under stress, it doesn't run out. So a little bit of stimulation, we get plenty of oxytocin. Too much oxytocin in a man makes him sleepy. So all the things that women want to do with us makes men sleepy. Like she wants to tell us all the details about a new wedding she heard about, we're going right to sleep. She wants to go to a new art gallery, we're going to sleep. We want to go for a walk somewhere and not really going anywhere, we're getting tired just thinking about it. Or heaven forbid we go shopping in a mall. Oh my gosh, you never know where you're going to go, what's going to happen, who we're shopping for, and when it's going to be over. These are all important things for men to sort of set their goal and get to their goal as fast as possible. That stimulates testosterone. So it's not that we men can't go into that world. We like going into that world. That's what sex is all about. Literally, we go into that oxytocin world, and she's happy, we're happy, everybody's happy. Then the climax happens. At the time of climax, there's a huge release of oxytocin in her body. And for a man, there's a huge release of oxytocin. It causes those contractions to happen. Well, you can see the difference between Mars and Venus right then. After all that oxytocin comes in his body, what then happens next? He falls asleep. His testosterone levels start to drop, and he pulls away, just like he's off in another world. She, on the other hand, she could talk, she could do it again, she could plan her future, she could share her past, she could cuddle for hours, all that stuff. It's a huge wash. So then somebody might say, well, why don't women just have more sex? Well, the problem with that is that to get to the point where her body can function sexually, women already need a lot of oxytocin before that. So sex is sort of one of the things up to about 60 or 70% full of oxytocin. Then she wants sex more than the guy. Now guys want sex until their testosterone levels start dropping. And this is what happens to men now in America. It's actually some of the new statistics is saying it's even starting at 32, but it used to be around 36. Men's testosterone levels decline every year, a little bit, little bit, little bit, little bit. And this is not good for his health. Men's heart health is directly linked to his testosterone levels. His circulation is directly linked to his testosterone levels. His energy levels is directed to that. If any man is depressed, he has low testosterone levels. Everything in a man's body is linked to testosterone. Why? Because testosterone is the major hormone that affects his stress levels. So that's the whole key to it. I was reading this great research from Japan recently for athletes, which they found that if a guy didn't have sex at least once a week, his testosterone levels dropped dramatically down. You can bring that to your wife tonight, husbands. But she says, I'm worried about his health. Okay, have sex. I mean, that's a big key thing. And of course, for women, what helps them to lower stress is that they're able to get support to do oxytocin things. So one is just a sense of encouragement to her to create a world where she's creating happiness for herself. Now, release from any guilt that you're taking away from him, because anytime you're happy, women, it makes a man happy. And that's a big difference between men and women. Her happiness makes him happy because he always takes credit for your happiness. I notice if I'm too happy and my wife's not, it doesn't make her any happier. So what we want to do is, first of all, shift our focus in terms of solving this new problem. Because basically, as I mentioned, I was down with the Ashwar Indians. You can actually look at the way cultures are before they have TV. I'll call that the modern world. And then we have the indigenous world before TV, and our Western values have been put around the world. And what you'll see is their culture, like so many others, has a very clear definition between Mars and Venus. In that world, it's men go to the jungle. Only men are allowed in the jungle. The jungle's a dangerous place. Women are allowed in. Why? Well, one of the reasons you don't want the women to die because they make the babies. But two is, on some level, they knew that men being in dangerous situations, emergency situations, we adapt to it very easily. It raises testosterone whenever there's emergency and urgency, and actually helps his health. So next time your wife is saying to slow down in the car, you can say, well, honey, it's good for my heart. As long as you're driving safely in that mode. So then the next is what about the women? The women they have rules, and the rules are women work in the garden, and they work with the children, and that's it. Men aren't allowed to help. If men help, they're ridiculed. I mean, literally, there are these two separate worlds. And this is really good for our health. Now, what are we doing today is not good for our health. And we can see it, how sick Westerners are. At the same time, am I even suggesting that we turn back the clock? No, this is a brave new world. This is a great world we've got. We've taken a huge step of more independence for women, more freedom for women. The quality of what women have in their lives has the potential to go dramatically higher. But we have to be able to face the new problems that this changing of orbits between Mars and Venus has caused. There are new problems. Women's stress levels are up. Women's health is getting worse and worse and worse. Infertility is more and more and more. What is going on? Is there a solution to it without turning back the clock? Yes, there is a solution for it. There are many solutions to help lower stress. What I focus on in this book is the most powerful solution, which is relationships. Relationships has the potential to lower our stress. Our relationships have potential to add stress to an already stressful world. And this is something we need to get straight. So there's three areas that I see helping to improve relationships, what I talk about in the book, which is in the area how to rekindle romance. There's all these books in here, wonderful books about rekindling romance. Men are not going to read them. If they do, they fall asleep because they don't speak to his hormone. I'll speak to his hormone on one of my examples in the book. Here's how you create romance. Men need to spell it out real clearly for these guys. And the first step in creating romance is a date. Men do, when they get married, every man does this, and I haven't met an exception. There may be a few, but I have never met one. Every man, after a few years of marriage, waits to the last minute, says to his wife on Friday night or Saturday night, "Hey, honey, you want to go out tonight?" And she says, "Yeah, maybe we can go out here," and they have a big discussion. Maybe they go out, maybe they don't. And he thinks he's being Mr. Romantic. He has no clue that this is one of the most boring things you can do in your relationship with a woman, is wait to the last minute and ask her what she wants to do. Can any women relate to that? Just raise your hands. To just surprise the men. And women are real shy about it. They'll often say to me, "Well, I guess that's just the way he is," and kind of she feels like maybe she missed out or something, but that's the way he is, and he seems really tired or whatever. It's not the way he is. It's the way all men are. Look at Valentine's Day, and you'll see that at the card store, the last day, all the men pour in to buy the cards. They wait to the last minute. The last shopping day for Christmas, all the men pour in to do their shopping. Men typically wait to the last minute to do anything. Now, why is that, first of all? Is that there's this part of the brain, in my second chapter I talk about how our brains are different, the amygdala. The amygdala is the emergency center in the brain. Now, for women, the amygdala is half the size as it is in a man's, but under moderate stress, it picks up all the moderate stress things. It creates 8 times more blood flow in the emotional part of the brain. And if that blood flow doesn't stop soon, then she will experience temporary amnesia and forget any good thing you ever did. And she remembers every mistake you've ever made. So all these bells and bells are going off. Emergency, emergency. Then that part of the brain is wired up. You can see the connecting tissue and the blood flow to the talking part of the brain. If she's able to talk about what's bothering her, then her brain calms down, and she's able to remember that everything is not so bad. And what actually happens at that point is a brain chemical called serotonin gets stimulated, which washes over the limbic system and reminds her that, you're not such a bad guy and that you are good and you do try and you love him very much, and life becomes much nicer again. Now, the difference between men and women is under stress, moderate stress, women have 8 times more blood flow. They're going to use up all their serotonin. By the end of the day, they're hungry. Give me some serotonin. And what stimulates it? Talking about problems. And why do men not understand this whole concept? Because men make serotonin 50% more efficiently. Men store 50% more serotonin. And men don't use it up under stress unless it's extreme stress. So here you've got a guy, he's adapted to danger. We are ready for risk. We are the emergency man. If you can start learning how to create emergencies, it's a button that gives men energy. I'm going to teach you about that briefly tonight. But men are designed. We go into the forest, we're in risk and danger. Men have done all these dangerous jobs all this time. Well, how do they adapt to that? They got all this extra serotonin to remind them it's going to be okay. Even if you die, they'll have a parade. See, we're designed for this. There has to be all these messages. So we live in 2 different worlds. We're coming together. It's a collision unless we learn how to make that coming together harmonious and mutually supportive. Trying to make a man into a woman does not work, but Trying to treat a woman the way a man wants to be treated doesn't work either. If she's talking about her problems, man, you don't tell her, don't worry about it, no big deal, I'll handle it. Well, there's nothing we can do about that, so forget it. Or why don't we just go have sex and forget the whole thing? Once you try that and that doesn't work, then you say, well, let's just watch TV. And of course, she could sit down and watch the news, but she's going to remember all the other things she has to do. A big difference between men and women's brains. Men can use one part of the brain at a time. And that's it. See, women, you can't do that. You have to use the whole thing. All the time. Any one part of the brain wants to do something, there's a conference call. Is that okay on the feelings? Is that okay with this? Everybody gets involved. So if you're just sitting there watching TV like a guy, he can just sit and forget the whole world, forget all his problems, let his whole brain rest. You can't do that, women. And you'll look over him and say, what a lazy guy. Instead of like, wow, I really wish I could be like that. Admire him. But really what he's doing, truly, he is rebuilding his testosterone levels. You can see this, is that when you're a testosterone creature, you run out of testosterone under stress. How do you rebuild testosterone? This is fact. This is measurable fact. If a guy goes to the gym to build his muscles up, his muscles break down, he uses up his testosterone. In the process, he's got to create more testosterone to rebuild his muscle mass. What does he do? He sleeps. When men sit down, literally their body goes into this recuperation mode. My daughter pointed this out to me in her, what's the name of that car? Prius. You know, we're sitting in the Prius, and the engine was going, and then we're just sitting there, and then it stopped. And then it was going into the battery mode, and you can't hear it. And then it kicked back into the motor mode. And I was reminded that's like me. Any moment I kick into the battery mode, which is just to rest. And that's what men will tend to do, is whenever possible, rest. Again, as seen in the mall, when a guy sees a couch, he says, honey, let's go in that store. Okay, there's a place to regenerate. You can actually see at the end of a man's day, his testosterone levels have dropped. If he sits, watches a football game, meditates, anything calm, quiet, sedentary, if he does that, his testosterone levels will start to rebuild. If he's watching TV, competitive game, something exciting, or he's at least changing channels quite rapidly, then more testosterone gets produced. And of course, if the screen is bigger, he will enjoy more testosterone. He will then have more energy to then service you, women. However, what you have to understand is that men get activated. There's a button that activates men, and the button is emergency. Now you think, well, I don't have to push a button to get him up in the morning. We already know it's an emergency. Every morning, we know if we don't get up and go to work, there's going to be a disaster. And it's that potential of disaster that pushes this little button called the amygdala to release dopamine, dopamine being a brain chemical that gives men energy. And one of the differences between men and women is that men run low on dopamine all the time. You can see this today as an epidemic, with 1 out of 5 boys taking a dopamine drug called Ritalin. All the ADD and ADHD stuff, that is a symptom of low dopamine. Once I started studying that, I realized every man I ever met was low dopamine. I mean, think about attention deficit disorder. What man can listen to his wife without being distracted for 10 minutes? Very few. There's like, can we go here, here? He gets very antsy, as opposed to just being able to be attentive. Well, it takes dopamine to create attentiveness. Dopamine gives energy. Emergency is what stimulates energy in a man's brain. Women have no conception of this because your brains have too much dopamine. When you have that feeling of overwhelm, too much to do, that's because you have so much dopamine. That dopamine's saying, do this, do this, do this, do this, and his brain has run out of dopamine, but he has plenty of serotonin. So he sits on the couch with nothing to do, but he feels like everything's okay. It's a whole different reaction to stress in this world. If we can just learn, we won't resent this in our partners, and we find effective tools for it. The most effective tool is romance. That's the thing that lowers women's stress the most. But men are going to forget to do it. Men stop doing it because it stimulates oxytocin, and men could care less. Their bodies don't need it. So how do you stimulate romance? You have to do something, women, that is like to you an oxymoron, which is you have to ask for it. And women think, well, if I have to ask for flowers, then it doesn't count. Instead of ask for flowers and appreciate the fact that he went to the store and got them. Of course, if you say to him, well, do you like my haircut? It's just not going to feel as good as if he notices, oh, you got your haircut. It's certainly going to feel better. But if you ask and you get a positive response, that's better than nothing. Now let's look at the big stuff that causes the big levels of oxytocin that women can ask for, and that's called a date, as I mentioned before. I keep thinking somebody's going to tell me my time's up. It is, but I'll finish this thing about dating. As one simple thing I mentioned it a minute ago. which is men will tend to wait to the last minute and ask her out on a date, or just say, what do you want to do tonight? Instead, 5 or 6 days in advance, if you plan a date, you plan it together. Ideally, he plans it. He plans this date. She's looking forward to the date. Just the fact that she's looking forward to the date means the rest of the week she's orchestrating her whole week around that moment. And men can't even conceive of this. We don't even know there's any benefit to that. What's the big deal? Who cares? So what? I mean, hey. But to her, she knows there's that moment out there. Then as everybody's pulling on her, she's responding to the world. But there's this sacred space out there that she's committed to. And that will keep her oxytocin levels much higher throughout the week, because it's a time where she feels he is going to be spending focused on her. He's not going to have his phone on to take business calls. It's going to be just between the two of them. It's their time together. Now this all sounds great. It wouldn't be wonderful, but he will always forget. Let's be realistic here. He's not going to remember to do this. It's like men only eat when they're hungry. He doesn't get hungry for oxytocin, period. So it's very hard for any sort of bells and whistles to go off inside him. They go, oh, it's a week in front of the weekend. We got to plan the date. So women, this is, you want the romance, you ask for the romance. It's learning just to push the button to get the romance. And what is that button? It's called asking. You just say to your husband, your boyfriend, okay, there's this wonderful play in town. I'd love to go to it. Would you get tickets and plan the date? That's it. Then about 3 days later, you say, oh, by the way, how's it going? Did you get those tickets? He'll say, oh, yeah, everything's set. Of course, he's just being reminded, I better do that. Okay? The emergency gives him the energy to do it. And you allow him to plan these things for you, and there's a variety of ways to do it. You can do the surprise date where he handles everything. You can do it where you give him some choices. He picks whatever it is. But even the fact that she's not picking the final decision, that releases her of stress. Often women go, it's just another decision I have to make, taking into consideration somebody else's need, as opposed to this is a time just for her. What's the big deal? It's 1 date a week. It's very easy to do, but women, you have to ask for it if you want it to happen. Second is communication. Major stress reduction when women can talk about what's going on. Their brains are designed to do this, to set out the alarm bells. I'm trying to remember the words my wife used. Something along the lines, when it's flooding, somebody's got to tell everybody. They may not want to hear it, but they need to know. Okay, this is what women's brains are designed to do, is notice everything that's going wrong and could go wrong. That's that under moderate stress, 8 times more blood flow to the emotional part of the brain. To relieve herself, you need to feel that somebody hears you. Otherwise, the burden of responsibility for the great flood is all on you. So her stress just goes up. She just needs to share her feelings. And there's nothing more powerful for a woman to feel seen and heard as when she reaches a little deeper and doesn't just say what the problems are, but says how she feels about the problems. Now you've got massive oxytocin levels going up. Talking about problems is one thing, but when you can talk about how she feels about the problems, just for a few minutes, oxytocin levels go up. So I recommend a few times a week for 10 minutes, just a simple conversation where you talk about all your feelings. But you already know what would happen. He'll think you're nuts. Why are you getting upset over nothing? What's the big deal? Okay, I'll handle all that. Then you don't have to worry your sweet, beautiful face about that. Whatever he's going to react to, he will try to fix the situation. So again, it feels like hopeless. No, women, there's a button you can push, and you can have the best listener in the world. All you have to do to push that button is you say, honey, I just need to talk to you for 10 minutes. No longer. He says, all right, you got his attention. Only 10 minutes. Now what am I supposed to do? You don't have to do anything. Just look my direction. Occasionally nod your head. If there's a long period of silence, you could say, tell me more. That's it. No more talking. And when I'm done, there'll be no talking about what I talked about. So basically, you don't have to say anything, do anything, fix anything. You don't even have to feel bad. Nothing. There's no performance for him to do. So there's no way a guy could lose with this. And it only takes 10 minutes. I'll try it. And he has to look in her direction. And he's not even tempted anymore to look away, because men look away to figure out, what is she saying? What does she want me to do? What is my plan? And another unique thing about men and women's brains is that if a man has a stroke up here in the listening part of the brain, front left, he'll never listen again. It will die and they'll be gone. If a woman has a stroke in the front left where she listens, there won't be a drop in hearing at all. She's got 6 other places in the brain where she can listen from. Women can analyze and listen. They can feel and listen. They can prioritize and listen. They can remember and listen. They can plan to the future and listen. And they can prepare to talk and listen. All those things simultaneously. Men can only do it from one place. So women often feel he doesn't listen, and the truth is men don't listen ever in the way women need to be heard. Matter of fact, no man ever in history has ever really heard a woman unless she uses this technique. Because what will happen when a woman starts talking about problems is instantly, the wiring in a man's brain is differently. The amygdala responds to problems. In a man's brain, the amygdala is wired up to the action center. So as soon as she starts talking about problems, he thinks, must take action. What am I supposed to do? Is this problem important? Is it not important? Not important, cancel. Go back up, listen to what else she's saying. So he's literally running around his brain. Occasionally, if there's strong feeling, he has to relate to the feeling, and then the whole thing stops. Because once he goes to the feeling part of the brain, he can't think at all, nor can he remember what you're talking about. So he's literally, while you're talking to him, his brain, he's running all over the place. If you tell him you don't have to solve anything, fix anything, analyze anything, you don't have to change any way, you don't have to feel bad, guess what's going to happen? He will stay located in one part of his brain. And he'll just look at you. And looking is easy for him as long as he's not doing the other stuff. The amygdala is wired up to action and looking. And of course the looking has to be slightly active. So I suggest you just move your eyes just a little bit around her face. You just stay busy and keep stimulating dopamine in the brain and gives you energy. It will, and she won't know the difference. And as one woman said, I don't care if he's looking around my face. He's never even seen my cheeks before. So I'm happy with that. But you just, and I talk about the various ways to keep him focused. But the bottom line, if he senses that he's helping her, then his testosterone levels will be rising rather than falling. You know, when women talk about the stress of their day, if you listen to what they're saying, they'll be talking about a variety of different kinds of problems and tension, stressful situations. 70% of them have no solution at all. You know, like the weather here is bad, the weather is good, the traffic, there's no solution there. She's just talking about some of her feelings of frustration, whatever. But the guy is over there taking it literally. What am I supposed to do? I can't change the weather. Do you want us to move? I mean, do you want a better car? Am I supposed to get a job here? What? You know, the whole thing, he's responding to these problems. If you tell him, I have a big problem, which is I'm stressed out like the rest of the women in the world, and all I need is more oxytocin. And how do I get it? I can talk for 10 minutes at a time, and you don't say anything, do anything, fix anything, change anything, and I feel better. There's not a man in this world that won't do this. And we are great listeners. We just have to be given the instructions. You're just going to listen, and he can do it. And just to think about the perfect compatibility between men and women, if you get objective about this, men love coming home from work, forgetting their problems, and watching TV. They like to watch the newscaster talk about other people's problems that they don't have to do anything about. So women, it's a perfect fit. You just have to set them up and say, okay, I'm here to tell you the news. My problems that you don't have anything, you don't have to do anything, just sit back and listen and don't change the channel. And he'd be happy to listen the whole time. Then you have to make this work. You have to then walk out of the room. Don't ask him the dreaded words. Well, how do you feel about that? Or what do you think about that? Because then no matter what he says, it ruins it for him and for you. So he knows that. So take away all anxiety with the whole thing. So that's the second area. Those are just a couple examples, how to improve communication, how to start creating the romance again. Those are the most powerful oxytocin stimulators and testosterone stimulators in men. Then when you come home, you will both have more energy. So while he's sitting on the couch, he'll be more efficient in producing the energy. So I call that the cave. He can come out of the cave easier, more effectively, more commonly. And at any time, women, you know you've got this great communication. You can call upon his help. He is the emergency man. You just have to learn how to call upon his help. You don't say things like, hey, would you like to go out tonight? You say, honey, will you take me out tonight? I'm tired. I don't want to make dinner. It's done. You make the request as opposed to asking what he wants to do, because he'll always tell you what he wants to do. He's acutely aware of what he wants to do. My wife ever says, would you rather sleep late or come with us to the farmer's market? I'll sleep late. But if she says, will you take us to the farmer's market? Oh, emergency man to action. I have it. And literally, asking a man is pushing that button that activates energy in his brain. And that's one of the wonderful gifts that women get through this book, is realizing that there's this idea, a mistaken notion women feel that if he doesn't spontaneously do it, then he doesn't love me. Now you have a new measure, which if I push the emergency button and he doesn't respond, then he doesn't love me. But men deserve that opportunity to have you ask and ask again, and learn how to ask in ways that really stimulate a man the right way, just as men have to learn how to do the things that women need the right way. So I've written a whole book about that, and I'm happy to answer some of your questions. Thank you very much.